So as I alluded to earlier, this is a little demonstration of the BRMS product, and in particular the JBPM5 stuff that we've introduced. You've seen in some of the other slides I presented earlier the architecture of the engine. Essentially there is a core BRMS engine, and up in the top right you can see a little disk which is the repository. Everything is based around the repository. All of the rules and the artifacts that I use for the demonstration will be inside a repository. It's a simple scenario. I kind of imagine somebody phoning into an insurance company, talking to an agent and getting a quote for insurance, but it equally could be somebody dialing in using a web interface and interacting with the system that way. So the idea is I've got a couple of facts. This is what's referred to as the data model, essentially. I've got a concept of a driver, a concept of a car, and a policy. And in fact, I'm going to do calculations based upon the age of the driver. So I'm assessing the risk of the driver by just looking at his age. Clearly, in a proper application, you would have a lot more things that you take into account. But just so you can see it work, we're just looking at age and actually the make of the car. So if it's a BMW, it's expensive. If it's a Ford Fiesta, it's kind of cheap. And then you'll get to see the policy. So these are the kind of goals for the demo. Pricing rules and driving history will get added in later. But I want to show you the data model. I want to show you the business process. You'll see a thing called a decision table. A decision table is essentially just a set of rules that are laid out in a kind of spreadsheet and makes it easier to kind of look at from a business perspective. I'll show you the rule authoring tools. We'll talk a bit about how this particular project was version controlled, and I will be talking about deployment as well. So let's start off. Guess you can see here, this is the application server. Just tucked away in the background, I've got a log file. This is actually one I ran earlier, and I just want to, what I'm going to do is just accept that policy. Let me just log back in because it's complaining about that. Asks, okay. So just to be sure, what happens at the end of my business process is I retract all of the information about a customer and rules. So that's happening nicely in the log file. So the first place to start is to look at the rules themselves. This is the package that's inside the repository. You can see I'm not logged in still. Let's try again. Back to that. Yeah, here's the package. So we've got an area for the business rules, an area for the model. So this is the data model that we talked about, the car and the driver and the policy and so forth. This is the process, and there's some other bits and pieces like the forms that we use inside the demo. Here is the quote itself. So what we're going to do is have a look at the process for running a quote. Takes just a few seconds the very first time you start it, but after that it's a little bit quicker. If you can see here the start node, maybe I can just scroll that down. Review policy and retract. Let's see if I can make a bit more real estate here. So top left you can see the start node. You can see I'm going into an area where I'm setting some variables up. I've got a little human task here. Can you see the human guy sat at the desk there? He's the task. I'm going to ask for information about the driver. I'm going to set the driver information up, and I'm going to fire a rule which is all about determining the risk of that driver. And then I'm going to ask about the car, do the risk of the car, update the rules, firing the pricing section, and then reviewing the policy. And that thing you saw me do at the very beginning was retracting the rules. That happens at the very end. So what I do is pull the data out of the rules engine. Okay, so let me introduce you to another console, which I'm going to have to just check that I'm still logged in on. Right, so this is like a monitoring system. So this is a thing we call Business Central. You can see the process there. Quote 222 is ready to start. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the REST API to talk to the engine. Let me just take you through that before I do it. So I think that might be worth explaining. Just bring the video man's sound with me. So you've seen the process. You've seen how we'll step through the process and what we're going to see. The REST API is essentially I'm using a web interface to talk to the JBPM engine. So I'm going to ask the REST interface for a list of the processes available. And as you can see on the screen, it's come back with process available is called quote 222, and it's ready to start. So in a minute, I'm going to start that process, which posts the request back into the engine. I'm then going to go round asking it for the list of tasks. So this will be get driver, get car, get the review. So it just goes around this process where it's talking and interacting with the back-end engine. So what I should show you first, we go back to the rules. The first thing we're going to ask about is the driver. So this is the driver. And I'm going to put in a driver who's going to be 45 years old. So my driver will associate himself with a risk of 7. Okay? So in this decision table, which has generated a set of rules, and you can see the rules that it generates here. Pretty straightforward language. It concentrates on something called when and then. So when policy is a particular age, you set the risk of 7. So for us, we're going to hopefully fire this one here. We're going to get a risk of 7 by putting in 45. So that will be the driver. And then when we go onto the car, I'm going to put a Ford Fiesta in. So it's going to come up with a risk of 1. So remember 7 and 1, right? Final thing to look at in the rules is the price. So here we are, 7 and 1. Price is going to be $3.99. So for a driver risk of 7 and a car risk of 1, we are determining the price. And again, it's a decision table. It's a set of rules. This is a web interface that a business analyst could use. You could equally use Excel and load spreadsheets into the system. There are multiple different ways of running the rules. So let's proceed. Let's start the quote. You see the quote comes back with a definition of saying I'm running that quote, and if I pull up the tasks, I get the very first task. So I'm going to put my user in, and I must remember to put 45. Okay. Submit the task. I now go to the next stage in the process, and I can prove that to you if I go and look at the process that's running. Here's the process, and we can look at the diagram. It says we're now in get car. So we're moving along the process. In fact, I should have stopped and showed you the get driver, but hey. Here's the car. We've got the driver stuff. Close that window down. Get the next task, which is the car. Ford Fiesta, ABC 123. Submit that. And of course now we can look at this again and see that we're in the review policy piece. So you can kind of artificially done this so you can see the process stepping through. You can see the different components of the business process and the various rules that are firing. So final thing here, pull up the last task, which is the review policy. And do you remember the $3.99? Okay. So I want to prove that this works. I'm going to accept that policy. I'm going to go into BRMS. So the tasks have gone. So BRMS, I'm going to look at this car insurance pricing, and I'm actually having a special offer on 45-year-old drivers driving Ford Mondeos, Ford Fiestas. I'm going to make it £101. So all I've had to do is to change the rule. I'm saving it and checking it into the repository. That now should change the price. So let's go do it again. Tasks. Start the quote. Here we are. Peter. Miami. 45. Ford Fiesta. Registration. Magically the price has changed. So what you're seeing is an application which has the business process pulled out and the rules pulled out, and the application really is very simple Java code which just populates the page. So the decisions are all made inside the business rules engine. One last thing I'd like to do is just to show you the development environment where this is all built, because this is a Java application after all, and it was built inside Eclipse. Have a look down here. If you take a look inside the resources of the project, you'll see there's the quote that we were looking at earlier. So again, this is the developer view of the quote as opposed to a business view. And they talk about the idea of round tripping. So a business analyst could lay out a kind of a business process that they had in mind, put it into the repository, and then have a developer pull it out into Eclipse and actually add the meat and potatoes to the actual kind of back-end coding.